What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always, and once again, by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they decided at 4 o'clock Eastern time on the nose, news was coming, whether it's their team, a different team, their former quarterback, a new cornerback. Everything dropped within the matter of seconds. Just to give everybody a quick recap, Brandon Echols comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers on what I assume is a one-year deal. Haven't got to read too much into it because, again, it dropped 30 seconds ago. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf becomes official. We're diving into Aaron Rodgers, possibly the report that Mason Rudolph is on the radar right now. Kirk Cousins, which I got nasty. I'm talking nasty DMs about Kirk Cousins. Nasty. I get bad DMs every single day, okay? Some days significantly worse than others. Kirk Cousins, just naming him as a possibility because not even that I'm hearing anything, just that the NFL is talking about it. Nasty DMs. We're diving into what that means in the NFL draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Got a little word there, and Cooper Kupp becomes available. But meanwhile, Russell Wilson's headed to the Cleveland Browns for a visit with the dog pound and Myles Garrett, maybe to reunite with Kenny Pickett. So I'll ask you two things. One, first, welcome back. Glad to have you. Missed a hell of a show yesterday, but I'm glad that Aaron Rodgers is holding off for you. First off, how you feeling? Did you have it anywhere on your bingo card? Because we come up with wild bingo cards, and with the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got to assume the craziest. Did you have it out there? Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett leading the Cleveland Browns in 2024 or 2025, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because I had a lot of crazy things. I don't think I had that one.
I don't think Myles Garrett had that on his bingo card when he re-signed with the Browns after making a big to-do about, well, I want to win a Super Bowl and I want to see what the Cleveland Browns plan is before signing that extension. If their plan that they told him was Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson, something tells me that he would want to add a couple more millions to that very expensive contract that he signed a couple days ago. Fortunately, I'm feeling better, powered by Pepto-Bismol and ginger ale today, but definitely feeling much better than I did 24 hours ago and excited to talk about some Steelers news.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're feeling better. Everybody was wishing you some T's and P's yesterday. I did let everybody know that you were most likely spewing from both ends like a fire hydrant because food poisoning got the best. But, that's because we're all a big family here, and this is what we do.
That's accurate reporting.
Good. I'm glad. That's all I do. Russell Wilson. We will talk Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to talk a lot of Aaron Rodgers, and I hope everybody sticks around for it. On top of Mason Rudolph, Kirk Cousins, Cooper Kupp, and everybody else. But Russell Wilson to the Browns dropped literally a minute ago. And I mean, I think it would be awesome. Like, the NFL is pure chaos, and it's best when it's chaotic. And Kenny Pickett going to the Cleveland Browns was cool. Russell Wilson going to the Cleveland Browns is even better because somehow the tide has turned to Steelers fans hate Kenny Pickett. They don't want anything to do with Kenny Pickett. But the Pittsburgh Steelers themselves might actually hate Russell Wilson. And that's a story right there. The guy who replaced him, possibly Aaron Rodgers. It would have been way better if it was Justin Fields, but possibly Aaron Rodgers getting to take on Russell Wilson twice a year. A Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett quarterback matchup. Battle in camp. I hope that they pass up on Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward for this decision, and that Russ is the guy. And we just get to see what happens. Like, at that point, we just get to see how this goes down. I mean, first, this is live reaction here. I think it's hilarious. Shout out Russ. Hope he gets an opportunity. Was pumped to see Kenny get an opportunity. I thought he was going to be the guy in Cleveland. That won't be the case. It'll be potentially Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett with Deshaun Watson looming over the corner, just saying, I'll be back, guys. Don't even worry. I'll be back. Myles Garrett, man. if you were not a fan of Myles Garrett, okay, you have had one hell of a week watching this transpire and saying, man, that guy picked a bag. And yikes is all I have to say. For those of you who missed, Russell Wilson will be traveling to the Cleveland Browns and then the New York Giants to begin his visits, which means that at least two teams are not sitting around waiting for Aaron Rodgers. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have been completely silent, and there have been reports and rumors out the wazoo talking about, I think I said wazoo twice at the beginning of the show. That just clicked in my head. That's too many times. There have been reports and rumors flying all over the place. Sounds better. About Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers and where everything stands and where everything could stand. We're talking $90 million price tags, which I addressed yesterday. That might actually be true. We're talking darkness retreats, just complete silence. Maybe this dude's swimming in some ocean somewhere and he's just ignoring the Pittsburgh Steelers. Where do they go next? How long are they willing to wait for Aaron Rodgers? I think it's time to break it all down. And we'll start with the easiest update that there is, and that is nothing. I have been, when I'm talking radio silent all day, I haven't gotten a phone call. I haven't gotten a text message. I got one phone call from the Steelers PR people, just pretty much just saying, hello, what's up? How you been? You know, kind of like hinting at the idea that there's going to be some sort of press conference in the next coming weeks or something about the new players, as there always is, just to check on things, make sure I was going to the owners' meetings. That was it. The only phone call that I've gotten all day. Have gotten zero updates, which means that nothing is happening, that there are no conversations being had today, that it is just sit and wait time for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which brings up so many things. Everybody is freaking out one way or another. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's just a good time for us to all just practice some patience, just sit around and say, it's going to be okay, because it can't get worse. That's the craziest. It can't get worse. There's no way for this to spiral into something worse than what it has already become. And I'm on board with Aaron Rodgers. I think I've convinced myself that Aaron Rodgers could become something pretty good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've spent many days kind of diving into, I really truly believe that Aaron Rodgers has enough left in the tank for the Pittsburgh Steelers to build it around him, which they have, and just say, you're not the quarterback that's here to save us. You're just our good quarterback. And that might be exactly what Aaron Rodgers needs at this point in his career. But it's quiet, and that brings up a lot of noise, obviously. Let's start with the biggest misconception, okay, in the entire thing. And that is everybody reporting or rumors flying or the radio people talking or whoever, which I'm a talking head too. So I'm not bagging on anybody. I'm just saying words. Talking about how Aaron Rodgers has gone silent, how he is ignoring the Pittsburgh Steelers and making them wait, and how this is just so dramatic and it's terrible. And I can't believe he's doing this. And the Steelers shouldn't be waiting around for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe they shouldn't be waiting around for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe that part of it is true. But this is just what happens. This is just how these things go. Justin Fields left the Pittsburgh Steelers completely silent without returning a phone call on an offer that he was the only one. They were the only one that was willing to make an offer to, or that could make an offer to him. He had it on the table. There was no phone call for negotiation. And I don't know, maybe it was the end of the negotiations. Maybe it was, this is our final price, period. There it is. Went 4 days without calling the Pittsburgh Steelers back, leading up to free agency, where he called them and said, I'm going to the New York Jets. That's what I'm doing. So sorry, guys. So this is just how this happens. This is just how negotiations go. Players do these things, especially when they have the opportunity to wait and decide. Names like Aaron Rodgers have built up a career high enough that you are the guy that you're going to get a job somewhere. It's up for him to decide where he wants to go, which isn't great for the Steelers, but they've put themselves in this place. They've done this to themselves. And when it comes to like getting worse, it's not going to get worse. Who are you going to miss out on in the meantime? Russell Wilson? The Steelers don't want Russell Wilson. They want everybody but Russell Wilson. They're willing to dive in to the depths of the quarterback market before they want Russell Wilson to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why he's going to the Browns, because he's looking at this going, I don't even have a market. I have to figure out some sort of market. He's not going to Cleveland to walk in there and be the pole position starter. Him and Kenny are going to compete, maybe with Shedeur Sanders. And that's just how dry his market is, because the Pittsburgh Steelers have been in communication, but they don't necessarily want him to be their starting quarterback. They'd look at other places. I mean, DK Pittsburgh Sports brought up yesterday that they called Mason Rudolph. That's where they're looking. They're looking everywhere but Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think that there needs to be this massive sense of urgency between the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. Now, if this draws out a week, that's a different conversation, but it's been 72 hours. And I think at this point, it's like, it's okay. You know, like you weren't allowed to talk to Aaron until noon on Monday. So you were talking at noon on Monday, which I get it. Legal tampering period isn't actually when things start, but let's say noon on Monday. Let's say they follow the rules. Noon on Monday. It's been 48, 52 hours since those conversations began. It's not like it's been a month. You know, it's not like it's been since January. For the Steelers, it feels like it's been since January because they've been putting off signing a quarterback way longer than they should. That part I agree with. I think the criticism towards the Steelers is very much so real and true. But I think on the Aaron Rodgers side of things, it's, you know, a little early to be acting like this guy's leaving everybody on a string dangling for weeks at a time. He's not. It's been 2 days. That decision could come tonight. That decision could come during this podcast. That decision could come tomorrow. Who knows when it comes? Now, again, if it's a week, you make phone calls and you hey, okay, we're going in different directions. But the Steelers will start to think and do that. That's not how they operate. Omar Khan's not going to sit around and be a sucker. He's just giving Aaron Rodgers time to breathe because they are optimistic about things. And at the same time, Russell Wilson goes to the Giants. That works in the Steelers' favor. That just made Aaron Rodgers less expensive because his options or his demand is much lower. That's how I view this waiting thing. I don't think it's that bad. I honestly think that when it comes to free agents, Cooper Kupp's still signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, I don't even know what other wide receivers are still floating around out there. That Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, whoever it would be, if that's the position, would still sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they'd be under full understanding that the Steelers have a plan at quarterback, and the Steelers would lay that plan out. I don't think it's holding them back at all. And from everything I've been told, it's not holding them back at all. It's not. There aren't free agents sitting around wondering, man, I wonder what the Steelers quarterback situation is going to be. They've been very transparent of what their plans are, whether it's plan A, plan B, plan C, to get a quarterback in the building. And because of it, guys have been pretty responsive. And if you're sitting there going, well, they haven't signed anybody, who has? Chris Godwin went back to the Bucs. Darius Slayton went back to the Giants. Like, there hasn't really been the big, giant, crazy signing at wide receiver that everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. It's been all little guys. Cooper Kupp's the first name to emerge as like a real possibility for the Steelers. And he just hit the open market 14 or 19 minutes ago. So there doesn't even have to be a worry about free agency signing. I just don't think right now it's time to panic about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. Things are still rolling pretty well. If quarterback's the last place you plug in, be patient because it might work out. And for everybody who's sitting around going like, you would never get Kirk Cousins, who might be a backup plan. And I'm just going to ask you about all this, so don't even worry about it. But when it comes to Kirk Cousins, it would never be a backup plan. The longer this goes on and the closer we get to the the Falcons realizing how bad of an idea it is to pay your backup quarterback $40 million, the closer we are to the Falcons saying, all right, for a 5th round pick, we'll cut, $10 million off of it. All right, great. Sounds good to me. $30 million for Kirk Cousins. And then we get, or we just give up a 5th round draft pick. Maybe it doesn't work, but it's worth a shot. It's better than the rest of these. And when it comes to Mason Rudolph, again, like that's not an improvement over Aaron Rodgers. So there's just no need to rush things. There was a need to rush things. The Steelers are past that need. We've blown right through the gates of urgent and have gone to scraps. We blew through the scrapyard gates. That's what the Steelers have done. And we're here where things are okay to be somewhat calm and let Aaron Rodgers figure it out. But he does have a decision to make, and the Steelers, from everything that I'm hearing, are not making the big splash offer to Aaron Rodgers. So he's deciding between a big splash offer with New York, who is not an impressive team, but also might be able to pair him up with Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter, which is pretty damn impressive. You go to the Pittsburgh Steelers where you're going to get paid less, but you have an opportunity to win, which is big, which is big. But what is that dollar sign? How far of a gap is it is the question. And how close are the Steelers willing to get to that gap? Because I get it. I get what Aaron Rodgers has done and made throughout his career, but this is a business at the end of the day, and everybody views it as it until their team gets screwed over. But right now it's a business, and the Steelers, nobody wanted to overpay for Justin Fields. I would imagine everybody should feel the same way about Aaron Rodgers. That's where I stand currently. We'll dive into everything individually here in a second on Mason Rudolph potentially coming back to the Steelers, what it would take to get Kirk Cousins, and then obviously Cooper Kupp. But I just want your thoughts. You weren't here yesterday. Your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers, where things stand. I mean, you got to view it all from what was most likely, knees on the ground in the bathroom, but you got to view it all. What's your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, as far as the timeline's concerned, I mean, you got to think the guy goes into a 3-day darkness retreat every time he makes a decision, and he's got 2 decisions to make. I mean, everybody expects him to play football next year, but he hasn't outwardly came out and said that he is planning on playing football next year. So that's 3 days for the decision to play football, 3 days for the decision on where to play football. So, if we're on Rodgers time, which it seems like the Steelers are on Rodgers time right now, we still probably got 3 or 4 days before he decides to make a decision. So, as far as the timeline's concerned, I get it. They had to have a sense of urgency if they wanted to get things done with Justin Fields, because as we saw, he ended up being one of the 2 most hotly contested quarterbacks on the market. It was him and it was Sam Darnold. And after that, there's a reason there hasn't been very many quarterbacks signed. And if they have been, it's to play as a backup. So as far as the timeline's concerned, I know it's unfortunate. I know we all want an answer because we speculated for 3 months and most of us were all saying, well, it's going to be Justin in the end anyway. And whenever that curveball is thrown, whenever the New York Jets decide that they want to just pay all the money, who cares if it works or not? We're just going to overpay them and see if throwing a lot of money at this problem is going to fix it. Whenever that happens, it sends you into scramble mode. But whenever the market is this dry, when it comes to actual talent, it's going to take some time, especially when you're waiting on a 41-year-old to make a decision. So I'm not overly concerned about the timeline here. I agree with what you said yesterday that of the options remaining, unfortunately, it probably is Rodgers, something that I didn't want to see. I wanted to see Justin Fields because I thought that this team going into next year is not a team that I can see vying for a championship. And that's where the difference comes between me and the Steelers. And I think that's where the difference comes between people that want Rodgers and don't want Rodgers. If you think this team can vie for a championship, yeah, you're probably okay with Aaron Rodgers because at his best, he might be able to still get you there. At the very least, he's done it before. Whereas if you don't think they are, then what you want to see is the Pittsburgh Steelers try to figure out their answer for the future. And if I don't see them being a championship contender, and I want to see them try to figure out who their guy is for the future, in no way, shape, or form is that a 41-year-old quarterback. I don't care what his name is or how many MVPs he has behind him. So that was always my biggest hang up on Rodgers. But now that we're here, it's the best option you have. Whether you're trying to vie for a championship or not, that's probably the best quarterback available on the market.
It certainly is. There are no questions it is. And people yesterday, I was watching Jim Wexell and Mike Pursuta talk about this today. And I mean, Pursuta cracks me up every time he opens his mouth, but he was going off about how, Aaron Rodgers isn't an example that a young quarterback should be following and blah, blah, blah. Maybe off the field, that's definitely it. I 100% agree. But on the field, Jordan Love loved him. And if the Steelers want to go young behind him, I just think that's the plan. I don't know, like, what is Russ going to teach you? Russ is going to teach you how to throw a moon ball and to be extraordinarily positive, more positive than anybody else in the whole world, which is awesome. Which everybody thought like Russ. I really, truly do. But Aaron Rodgers is potentially, like, arguably the greatest passing quarterback of all time, not just generationally, of all time. That guy should be able to work with the Jackson Dart, work with the Will Howard, work with the Jalen Milroe or Quinn Ewers, and to be able to teach him something, even if it's just for a year. And if that's where the Steelers are, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that situation. I don't think it's the best case scenario, but I'll say it again. And I've said it all offseason. Justin Fields was a lottery ticket, and that's as good as you were going to get this offseason. That's as good as you were going to get was a lottery ticket. There was no surefire bets. There was no, this quarterback was going to be awesome. There was no Tom Brady's available or young Aaron Rodgers is available or whoever is on the market. There's none of that. It was Justin Fields, I guess, which is why he signed for $30 million guaranteed, because there was nobody to challenge him outside of Sam Darnold, who I think's market was low, to be honest, because teams knew that Seattle was going to give them a good chunk of change. And they said, well, I'm not going to compete with them. It's not about competing for Sam Darnold. It's about who's willing to pay him a lot of money. The Seahawks are great. We're all backing off. That's what it came down to. That's why Geno Smith is in Vegas, because that's why Derek Carr is still in New Orleans. In another normal year, Derek Carr's gone. He's gone. They're moving on to a different quarterback. But the Steelers, they went into an offseason where there weren't good quarterback options. And if you're going to walk away with Aaron Rodgers and potentially a young buck, I just think there's potential for it to work out. That's all it is. I don't think it's going to work out. I'm not going to say they're Super Bowl champions or the next guy is great because of Aaron. I'm not going to say any of that. I'm just saying what you're left with is hope and potential. There wasn't much of that coming into the offseason. You're lucky to have walked away, if that's what ends up happening, with some of it heading into the season. Let's talk Mason Rudolph here, because that was an interesting one that emerged like 5 minutes after we got off, or after I got off the show yesterday, about Mason Rudolph reportedly hearing from the Pittsburgh Steelers, according to DK Pittsburgh Sports, about interest to return to the team. I'll ask you, do you think that phone call is a starting job phone call? Or do you think that phone call is hey, we need you to be Aaron Rodgers' backup?
I'm sure this year was a little humbling for Mason Rudolph, because he did get that boost to his confidence at the end of the 2023 season with the Steelers, making it himself think that, hey, I could be, a level 2 starting quarterback in this league. Just give me the opportunity. He got the opportunity in Tennessee, and it didn't go well. So I'm sure that kind of killed his confidence a little bit, but I'd be surprised if he came back to be a backup in Pittsburgh. I still feel like he probably would want to go somewhere where he's going to be given more of that fresh start, more of that new opportunity, than being a backup to a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, even if you say, yeah, once Aaron's done, it's your job. Yeah. I think that Mason would look at it and be like, dude, I'm not getting any younger here. And I'm getting further and further away from that 4-game miracle run that revitalized my career in the first place. So I feel like if you're having that conversation, it's, hey, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. Aaron's probably our first option, but if this doesn't go well, you are among our best options remaining. And I think that honesty would be what you would expect in that type of phone call for that type of free agent. But I think there's no way, shape, or form that they're calling Mason Rudolph to say, hey, you want to be a backup in Pittsburgh again? I don't think that's something that would go over well in Rudolph's camp.
Yeah, I don't know if it would either, because I don't know where Rudolph left the first time. I know, like, he sold his house. He was like, I'm moving, I'm
Done.
out, dude. I'm never coming back to Pittsburgh. Ended up back in Pittsburgh. I mean, I think that same situation could present itself, but it take time, and it'd be. I mean, by same situation, I mean the exact same situation where there is no market for Mason Rudolph, and the Steelers call him to be Kyle Allen, and they're like, hey, come on back, and he's like, all right, I could, I'll come back. That sounds good to me. I agree with you. I think there was a slim chance that phone call was a backup. I think really there is like a possibility that the Steelers are like, this guy, like, that's where we're at right now. Is I really truly do believe there's a slim chance that Mason Rudolph got a phone call, and that phone call was, if Aaron doesn't work out, you are amongst our list of candidates to be our starting quarterback in 2025, or at least compete with a rookie, at least compete with somebody that we're going to draft. Crazy to me, crazy, but it just shows you where they're at. And it really shows you where they're at with Russell Wilson, because it's, as we've gotten deeper, it's like the Najee thing. Doors open for Najee, doors open for Najee. We've stayed in communication with Russ. I don't know what that communication was, but I know that there are people in Pittsburgh who do not want Russ back, and who, like, really strongly don't want Russ back. And I think it's going to take a lot for the Steelers to end up with Russell Wilson. I really do believe Mason, just like you said, could be a backup plan right now, which is just so crazy to say. And then the other one's Kirk Cousins in my eyes, which people, again, like, I got wild DMs, dude. I got a DM from somebody with like 150 followers on Twitter. That's how, like, I could not imagine having 150 followers on Twitter and then like having just like being lame enough to DM somebody hate mail. Like, that's just wild to me. But I got wild messages about the Kirk Cousins situation. I don't think Kirk Cousins is on the table currently for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I've heard Rich Eisen, I've heard the Pat McAfee show, I've heard Albert Breer, I've heard Ian Rappaport, and I've heard Adam Schefter all talk about how at some point it does feel like Kirk Cousins is going to become available, and it does feel like the Atlanta Falcons are going to have to eat some of that money to make him available, because they're going to look at it as, okay, let's get a draft pick for cash. We'll eat $10 million if you give us a decent pick. And if that happens, I mean, Kirk Cousins easily skyrockets up this list as the second best option behind Aaron Rodgers. And I get it, he did not look good last year, but neither did Aaron Rodgers. Okay, so we are down to nothings. And you can make the argument, Mason Rudolph looked terrible last year in Tennessee. All circumstance. Everything is circumstance. I look at it and say, if they're willing to eat some money and they make him available, and the compensation is a 5th round pick or whatever it is, not whatever it is, but if it's a 5th round pick, like, you're making the phone call. The Steelers are obviously going to make that phone call. They're not going to sit here and say, I don't know, dude, Skylar Thompson really showed us something in Miami. I just really think that there's some potential there. They're making the phone call. And I believe that could happen. That's a slimmer chance as we sit here right now than Mason Rudolph, but I'm still not ruling out Kirk Cousins. And then we'll top this bad boy off with Cooper Kupp before we continue this conversation elsewhere. Because this is the best part of the Aaron Rodgers thing, is everybody nervous about the Steelers not being able to sign wide receivers because of a quarterback right now. I'm putting my money on Cooper Kupp ending up in Pittsburgh. I am. It just makes too much sense. They weren't going to trade for him. We've talked about his trade price the entire offseason, and they just weren't. It wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to walk in there, or anybody was going to walk in there and say, hey, you guys want a 5th round pick for a guy that you just made very aware that you're trying to trade to save cap space. And if you cut him on the first day of the league year, you save that cap space anyways. So chances are you're just going to release him. That wasn't happening. Nobody's trading for Cooper Kupp. The wide receiver market was good enough to ignore that situation. He's not Deebo Samuel, so you're not getting a 28-year-old who still has a bunch of juice left in the tank, maybe, and is worth taking a shot on. Cooper Kupp's a 32-year-old wide receiver who misses games most seasons and who's still phenomenal, but you don't know if he's even able to play a full season with 17 games, most likely becoming 18 at some point in the next 2-3 years. I look Cooper Kupp as an easy choice for the Steelers. And I would bet you Pittsburgh is maybe 2 or 3 on their list. I'm guessing Green Bay is pretty high. Excuse me. They want a wide receiver really bad, and they're probably willing to pay Cooper Kupp a little bit of money. But the Steelers probably also want Cooper Kupp, and they probably want Cooper Kupp really bad. And they're very much so okay. And they're okay with that slowing down Roman Wilson. They're okay with that opening the door for George Pickens. They are okay with what Cooper Kupp brings. And I don't know. This is a wild scenario that we've somehow ended up here with. But if the Steelers offense is, and there are going to be a lot of people that laugh as I say this, if the Steelers offense is Aaron Rodgers, Jaylen Warren, Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, and Pat Freiermuth, did they get better than last year? Did that happen somehow?
Yeah. I mean, if that's your if that's your entire offensive weaponry, you are better. I'm not going to say how much better. There's still a lot of questions, but you're better. I mean, and the one way to shine up the turd that is the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation is to surround him with as much talent as humanly possible. You already got DK Metcalf. If you bring in somebody else who, like you mentioned, he might only play 12 games, but in those 12 games, he's going to give you some really good production in Cooper Kupp. If you're bringing those types of guys in, you're going to give whatever quarterback it is, whether that's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's one of these rookies, whether it's, Mason Rudolph, God forbid, you're going to give them the best shot to succeed. And I think matched with the fact that I expect the Steelers offensive line to be much improved in year 2 of this group as a whole, agreed. I think that you're looking at this and you're saying, yeah, why wouldn't you look to bring in Cooper Kupp? I'm somebody that likes Roman Wilson, that thinks he's going to be good for the Steelers. I'm somebody that likes Calvin Austin and thinks he's going to be good for the Steelers. But the bar gets raised if you bring in Cooper Kupp. It's the same way that, hey, if you brought in DK and eventually got rid of George Pickens, are you that much better? No, you're not a bunch better, but the bar has been raised a little bit. And I think that the same thing occurs if you bring in Cooper Kupp. So I think that certainly would help the Pittsburgh Steelers, not to mention the fact that, listen, Cooper Kupp's not strictly on the inside. You look at what he did last year. He played 37% of his snaps on the outside last year. So this misconception of, well, he's short, so he can't play outside, it doesn't match up. Calvin Austin is short, but he was also primarily an outside receiver in college. Yes. So these guys do have that little bit of versatility. And I think Cooper Kupp, if you bring him in, it's simply to sit there and say, listen, our quarterback situation is not as good as we'd like it to be. So we're going to give him as much talent as humanly possible to work with. And if that means bringing in Cooper Kupp, then it means bringing in Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I agree. Just load up on it. You know what I mean? Just load up on it and give yourself options. That's what the Steelers should be doing, because that's what they need right now. They need options. They don't have the options. Last season they had no options, which, look, at no disrespect to Van Jefferson, okay? But did you see the Jordan Schultz tweet about when he got signed?
I did not.
Saying that, like, he's the solution to Tennessee's receiving problem. Yeah, tough times. Tough times to be a Titans fan, for sure. I agree. That's what you need is options. You just need to load yourself up with as many offensive weapons as you possibly can to go into the second phase of the offseason, which is the NFL draft, and say, where do we go? How do we change? What do we need to change? And if this was a straightforward, there were no changes to be made offseason, you don't do that. But the Steelers need to have options. They need to be able to go into the draft and say, if we don't draft a wide receiver, that's okay. We've done just fine. They need to go into the NFL draft and say, if we get a first-round pick for George Pickens, we can make that move. That's okay. We're loaded up enough. We're good to go. And we don't have to spend that on a wide receiver. We could go do something else, like draft a quarterback in the first round, because people are going to overlook that possibility. But George Pickens for a late round first pick, you just open the door to go draft Jackson Dart. Like that's a scenario the Steelers would like to present themselves with. It's across the board. You know what I mean? The Steelers, Roman Wilson doesn't work out in year 2. You have options. Anybody gets hurt at any point, you got options. That's what the Steelers need to do this offseason. That's what Cooper Kupp does. And to finish off this one, breaking news that the Steelers have finally agreed to a deal with Darius Slayton, which we wrote the story. The Steelers agreed to terms with Darius Slayton. Got a text immediately that said, no, they didn't. And then I got another text that said, if he goes back to the Eagles, you're going to look like an idiot. Make sure that you add that. And I said, okay, sounds good. I will make sure that things are good. I thought I was a little bit convinced. I was talking to my dad yesterday, and he had no idea that it was free agency whatsoever. So I called him and said, yo, did you hear I'm probably going to cover Aaron Rodgers this season? And he said, what? Aaron Rodgers is with the Jets? I'm like, dude, you have not been paying attention, huh?
Your dad was on his own darkness retreat.
Yeah, he really was. It was called the stomach bug. He was down for like a week. Didn't even talk to him. I called him once. He answered the phone. He's like, hello. I was like, yeah, dude, I'll call you in a couple days. Like, I'll see you later. And that was the last time I talked to him. I was hoping he was good the whole time. Told him about Darius Slayton. He immediately told me, he was like, well, you never know, dude. The Ravens last year got duped by Darius Slayton. You just don't know what's going to happen. And that's what I thought was coming with the Steelers. Darius Slayton's a massive pickup in my eyes. Massive. Like, that's a huge signing for Joey Porter Jr., for Corey Trice, to put the faith in Corey Trice to say, we really do think this guy could be good. We just need to see him continue to develop. I think it's all there for the Steelers. That's how I view Darius Slayton. But breaking news to finish off our agenda here on All Steelers Talk. With that said, that's everything I got to talk about. I just rambled for 37 minutes, and it was fun. But to not have any updates today, wild. Absolutely wild, which means tonight's going to be madness. Absolute madness. Me and the wife are planning to go for a walk, get a coffee, enjoy the sunshine. I followed that up with the disclaimer of, unless there's news. If there's news, we're done. We're done. All right. Let's finish up the show the same way we do every single day, and that's answering all of your questions. So if you got them, make sure you toss them in the chat. Shout out to all our members and to all our super chatters. I can't tell you how much we appreciate both of you guys. Nick, I'm going to toss it to you. What do we got?
Well, speaking of our members, we have to give a quick shout out to ND_Joe, our newest member. Hopefully we hear from Joe next Wednesday on the call-in show. This week was another, just class A, phenomenal performance from our members. So looking forward to next week's show already, and looking forward to hopefully hearing from ND_Joe. So appreciate you. Sir. As always. But after that, let's go to somebody who was featured on the call-in show earlier today. Shout out Cody Silva, who says, sir. Omar Khan is a genius. We fill our needs this year at running back and defensive tackle, pay GP next year, and use all of our comp picks and first-round pick next year to move up and get the #1 quarterback in next year's draft. I have never seen the bigger picture.
That is quite a large picture, my friend. That is quite a large picture. You draft running back and DT. I will say this. I saw Kaboli tweet out right before this show that he's really leaning towards the Steelers drafting a running back in the first round. I was told in Indianapolis that the Steelers might draft a running back in the first round, and I literally ignored it. Like, I just brushed immediately in and out of my brain. It was gone. There was nothing there because I just said there's no chance. There's just no chance. They're not going to do that. If Kaboli says so, maybe it is. Maybe they are. Maybe I should have listened. Maybe I should have been pushing that a lot longer than right now. Love the running back. Love the defensive tackle. Paying GP next year, if it works out, would be great. Would definitely, work in their favor. It would work in their favor to pay George Pickens next year, to franchise tag next year, and have a rookie quarterback on a deal where you could pay 2 wide receivers and say, we have DK Metcalf and George Pickens, dude. We don't need anybody else. I don't think the likelihood of George sticking around is super high, but I'm also not going to say it's zero. I don't even think it's close to zero, but I don't think that it's above 50 either. And next year, all the comp picks, which would be a lot. You'd have a first round pick. You'd have an extra third, an extra fourth, an extra fifth, and 2 extra sixth. I don't know if it gets you to number 1, but you could definitely make some moves with that amount of draft picks just to say, screw it. We're going to go all in and here you go. Maybe you have to give up another first the year after, but I think you could make that happen. And then you go get Archie Manning, and that's your QB. And you feel real good about it. The price tag for Peyton Manning's nephew is going to be large. It's going to be large, but I agree. I'm not going to say no. I like the big picture. I do like the big picture.
Let's go back to another shout out for our new member, Steven, not only becoming a member, but also gifting 5 memberships to a couple of lucky listeners that are in the chat today.
I didn't even know you could do that. Shout out to Steven, man. Appreciate you, dude. That's awesome.
Let's go to, speaking of Steven Cornfield, who says, Kenny Pickett can't escape the fate of being Russell Wilson's backup no matter where he goes. I find this absolutely hilarious. Enjoyed the call-in show earlier.
Wow, dude. I did not even think about that. Did not even think about that scenario, that Kenny Pickett will once again, be sitting in a situation where he looks like the number 1 QB, the guy in the AFC North. And then Russell Wilson just comes in and says, not today, pal. Not today. If he signs for a vet minimum in Cleveland, I don't even know what I'll do. Somebody's getting a Kenny Pickett Browns jersey. That's what we're doing. We're giving away 2 Kenny Pickett Browns jerseys if Russell Wilson signs with the Browns, because somebody needs to wear those in irony. That's incredible, actually. That's
I thought you had already thought about it, because when you said at the beginning of the show that Russell Wilson could once again reunite with Kenny Pickett, I thought you were just giving a throwback to the 3 days that they were teammates last summer.
Didn't. My brain's working, but it's not at the same time. It's making me sound real good, but the thoughts up there, they're not aligning. That's why I didn't have time to process it. I told you before this, it was one of those moments where I sat in this chair all day long and all last night. And 3:00, I leaned back and I woke up at 3:43 in the same position and went, whew, that was God looking out, man, saying, dude, you got a podcast, get up. And if it wasn't for it, I was not getting up till tomorrow morning at least, or my wife found me here in a couple hours, one of the two. I didn't click. Shout out to Steven. Shout out to Russell Wilson. T's and P's to Kenny Pickett, man. Hope he's doing okay with the news that just broke like an hour ago. I hope he hasn't even heard it yet. I hope nobody tells him so that he doesn't, because when he gets it, he's going to be like, are you kidding me? Is this real? Is this really happening again? That's going to ruin his whole day, dude. Whole day. T's and P's to Kenny Pickett.
Let's go to Steven's next comment here. Can we just get a football pitching machine for quarterback next year?
Yeah, with probably good little jugs machine. I think it could work. Chris Boswell, dude. That's Chris Boswell is going to be the quarterback next year. And I'm going to be totally fine with that. I also saw a comment in there that said, Noah, I ain't getting hit, but if you need me to throw the football up, I'll throw the football up. I got a good 25 yards on this arm. Not accurate, but I can moonball it 25 yards. Easy.
Let's go to Deborah, who says, hey, Nick and Noah, if I'm Con, here's what I do. Trade GP for a second-round pick, draft defensive tackle in round 1, running back in your recently reacquired second-round pick, DT again in round 3, and cornerback in round 4. Sign Russ and trade a 5th to New England for Joe Milton. What are your thoughts?
I don't hate it. I actually really like a lot of it up until corner, to be honest. But even in the 4th round, I think I'd be okay with that. I actually like this. I actually think I'm a big fan of this situation. I don't think that Russ is coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I also think it would be so boring to bring back Russell Wilson for another season, like so boring. But Joe Milton's super exciting. I would love that move. I think that move's fantastic. I agree. I mean, you know me well enough to know this is exactly how I see the draft up until corner. But I think in the 4th round, debatable, I'm going Jackson Slater out of Sacramento. I'm going to make that known every single time until he ends up in Pittsburgh. He's a guard. Go look him up. He's fantastic. But besides that, and the fact that Russ is boring, this is a good outcome for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. And then you just hope that Joe Milton's good. You gotta hope that Joe Milton's good. But Joe Milton would be a third or a fourth round pick in this draft. Did you hear? You might not have. Today on the Pat McAfee show, because that's all I've been doing for 2 days, Dan Orlovsky said that Tyler Shuck might be a first-round quarterback. Where have we come? Where have we come? He also said he hasn't watched tape on him, so I don't think he really knows who he is. But first-round quarterback, that is how far we've come. That's where
in the UFL draft. Sure. Okay, let's go to Chris.
Possibly.
Who says, guys, other than DK and Kupp, I would clean house at wide receiver and draft the right guys. Austin and Wilson can be replaced with upgrades in this year's draft.
I think I disagree. I love Calvin Austin. I think Calvin Austin's got so much untapped potential that hasn't been utilized because he hasn't had the quarterback or the play caller to utilize it. And the wide receiver position is the most dependent position on the field, without question. If you don't have a good play caller and if you don't have a good quarterback, you're screwed. You're never going to succeed. That's why Chris Godwin went back to Tampa Bay, because he was looking at it going, dude, I know what I'm going to get here. Like, this is going to be fine. I'm going to be good. Things are going to be okay. I think Calvin Austin has so much potential left that hasn't even been close to touched. And I'd be all about the Steelers finding that out. I don't know what to expect from Roman Wilson yet. Nick's very high on Roman Wilson. I'm waiting to see, but I don't think I'm replacing those guys. I think those guys are really good depth pieces to have. Calvin Austin being like a wide receiver 3 that I think is really, really good. And if you could go get DK and Cooper Kupp, and even if you keep George Pickens, that's a ridiculous 5 for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Let's go to Justin, who says, sign Cooper Kupp, trade Minka and GP, and then go get Sanders.
You'd have to go get Cam Ward, because apparently Shedeur Sanders is going to fall all the way out of the first round. And that's like becoming a real trend where that could like actually happen because people are not high.
I don't get how we're getting to that yet. Jackson Dart is a surefire first rounder.
Things are all
over with the draft.
It
really is.
It is. I'd go get Cam Ward though. I'd go do all that and go get Cam Ward. That'd be totally. I think Cam Ward's gonna be stud, but that would be huge. I think that I don't think they'd ever do it just because of Minka. But you think Minka Fitzpatrick and George Pickens would go get you, plus your first round pick would go get you pick 1?
Plus the first round pick, I think 100%. I think if you give those 2 in a first, I don't think there's any team that's going to look at that and say, yeah, no, we're good.
You think in a second instead of a first?
That might be more of a conversation. I still think the door would be open, but I don't think there's any team that would look at Minka Fitzpatrick, George Pickens in a first and say, you know what? In a year where the quarterback class isn't considered to be like, this isn't a Joe Burrow class. I'm sure Cam and Shedeur could be good, but there's nobody that they're expecting to be at that level. I don't think there's a team in the NFL that would look at that and immediately turn it down.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would work. I don't think they'd do it, but I think it would work.
All right, let's go down to Broderick, who says, Jim Wexell has reported that GP's reputation is, quote, tarnished league-wide and interest remains low. If that is true, trading him seems unlikely to me. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If Wex is saying that, then I definitely believe Wex. I mean, Wex is the dude. I don't know what GP's reputation is across the league. I know most times there's always that one team that's like, we got it, dude. We're fine. We could control them, and they can't. Almost every time they can't. But if Wex is saying that, then you have to believe it. You have to look at it that way. I haven't heard that, but I trust Jim Wexell's reporting. I don't know what his interest level is. That's also the part of it. But I will say this, like George Pickens' reputation might be tarnished around the league, but like interest remains low probably means interest for a high-end draft pick remains low. And I think that could change as we get closer to the draft and as wide receivers kind of move around a little bit. Right now, I could see that. I could. I don't know if it'll hold, but I think if we get closer to the draft, things could change. Where we stand right now, if that's the case, though, which again, I'll trust Wex, then yeah, I do think trading him is unlikely. for now, again, because if he doesn't show up to training camp because he needs a contract, that just skyrocketed. They're not going to sit around and say, we're just going to negotiate with GP. No, they'd get rid of him for whatever they could at that point.
Talent trumps all in the NFL. How many opportunities did Antonio Brown get handed to him to come back into the NFL? And what he was doing off the field is miles, and I don't even miles worse than anything that GP has done off the field. GP is just shown up late sometimes. Antonio Brown's throwing furniture at geriatric, and he was given opportunities. Talent trumps all. So even though his reputation might be tarnished, somebody will take a chance on him because of how young he is. Somebody will be willing to take a chance on him. So while it might be true, I still think that the talent trumps all will prevail fact in the NFL. But
most times it does. Yes.
Let's go to Real Ish. Appreciate you as always. Says, do you really think the Steelers would trade for Kirk Cousins? I mean, come on, man. At that point, I'm calling Mac Jones. It's the same player, just one is younger.
Oof. I mean, look, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I don't think Kirk Cousins and Mac Jones are the same guy. I don't think it's anywhere close. When Kirk's good, Kirk's good. I don't think he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but when Kirk's good, Kirk's good. This is my thing, though. It's not, do I want them to? Like, people misinterpret that as like, oh, like, why would the Steelers ever call this guy? I don't know. Like, I wouldn't call him. I wouldn't go get Kirk Cousins. That wouldn't be my move. If it was up to me, I'd be totally fine with Mason Rudolph if Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to come to Pittsburgh. I'd look at it and just say, screw it. Who cares? And then I'd go draft somebody in the third round or maybe even the first round and say, we're just going to figure it out. One way or another, we're going to figure it out. We're okay to suck for a year. We'll figure it out. But it makes sense for the Steelers to have interest in Kirk Cousins. That it does. And that's where it comes from. None of it is, do I think the Steelers should call him? It makes sense if the Steelers do at some point, because the Steelers, just like every other scenario, in my head, drafting Kenny Pickett was wild, but it made sense to the Steelers because they needed a quarterback. Going to get Russell Wilson in the first place, even though he was super cheap, to me, like, I pushed Justin Fields the whole season. Justin Fields the whole offseason. Justin Fields was the easy move. Go get him. I was at the combine preaching it every single day. Go get Justin Fields. Go get Justin Fields. I don't agree with a lot of things the Steelers do. They still do them, and they've always viewed them as that. That's why Justin Fields didn't start most of last season after, I told Mike Tomlin many times, you should start Justin Fields over Russell Wilson. Didn't listen once. So it just makes sense for the Steelers to have interest in Kirk Cousins if he's available. That's what it comes down to. I'm not saying it's the right move, but it does make sense.
Let's go to David, who says, sign Aaron Rodgers and Cooper Kupp, trade Pickens plus a sixth to the Pats for Milton and a second, then trade your first and fifth to the Cowboys so you can draft Ashton Ginty. So if I'm reading this correctly, that means in is Rodgers, Kupp, and Ginty out, and Milton. Out is Pickens, a sixth, and a second, and your first, sorry.
Yeah, and a fifth. Fifth.
There's a lot of moving pieces.
A lot of moving pieces here. So you're getting Ashton Ginty in the first round, then you get a second round pick, and you don't have a fifth. Honestly, it's not the worst idea. It's really not. Like it's real. We've really made some moves here, my friend, and you should call Omar Khan because you'd move fast in the NFL. You definitely. This is how quickly and chaotic things really do go down. So I wouldn't be about it, but I do think this is really not the bad. This is not a bad trade. This is not a bad situation. The Steelers get their running back that they need. They get Cooper Kupp. They get Aaron Rodgers. They get the backup young quarterback that they need. They still have a second round pick where they could go get a defensive tackle or whoever else they need in the NFL draft. They just drafted a running back in the first round, which is a position of need. I think I'm okay with it, to be honest. I actually kind of like this situation. I think it works quite well for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Let's go to, and I'm not sure how many times I'm going to get to say this, so I'm going to enjoy it every time I can. Unlimited Moonballs, who says, imagine losing to Rodgers in a Super Bowl and then winning a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers at the end of his career.
That would be so awesome. It'd be even better if it was against the Packers. It'd be even better. I'm telling you, it's got to play a role into this situation. It's gotta, like, you gotta think that Aaron Rodgers is sitting around going, I get to play in Lambeau one more time. Or not Lambeau, excuse me. I get to play in Soldier Field one more time. I get to face the Vikings one more time. I get to play the Jets. I get to play Green Bay in Dublin, Ireland. You get to play the Green Bay Packers for the last time in your career. It's just like perfectly set up for Aaron Rodgers to go on this retirement tour with the Pittsburgh Steelers and have his Brett Favre year. Like, that's what it's set up to do. And it just seems to Aaron Rodgers has to be able to take this. He does. We all know he takes this stuff into consideration. That's who he is. And I just think it makes too much sense. Way too much sense in every facet for him to not be leaning Steelers unless money is just wild from New York.
Let's go to Roger Steeler, who says, could we get Kupp, DK, and GP outside? Kupp in the slot, any quarterback would love that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they'd absolutely love it. And I think that's a real possibility. Like, I do think Cooper Kupp coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers is a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not even going to come close to ruling it out. I think it's a real possibility. It would surprise me if he went elsewhere, depending on the team. I think LA is up there. I think New England's up there. I think Green Bay is really up there. Pittsburgh's got to be in that top 4. And I just think he makes too much sense. I think the Steelers would love him. And I think he'd fit in so perfectly in Pittsburgh, and that he understands that they're going to get a quarterback. Like, that's the thing. He understands things are going to work out in Pittsburgh.
Let's go to Chris, who says, guys, are we close to signing a swing left tackle?
Not from everything I've heard. No, not yet. But the market is massive for offensive linemen right now, so they will not move fast on that. That will be a very slow position because they're not nobody should overpay for a swing tackle, and the Steelers are going to look at it that way. Like, we're not overpaying for a guy who's a backup. And right now, I mean, Jalen Moore went for ridiculous money. Dan Moore Jr. went for even more money. And they're going to let it calm down before they go out and they get a swing tackle. But I do imagine it's on the horizon. I wouldn't be surprised if it's next week in the second wave of free agency.
Let's go to Maddie, who says, how can we ensure that the Steelers get Travion Henderson in the draft without having a second-round pick currently? Do we have to take him in the first?
I do think that you'd have to take him in the first. I do think that would happen. And I'm not going to rule that out as a possibility. I think the running backs will climb in this draft class. And I think that the Steelers could take a move on Travion Henderson and say, screw it. This is the 21st pick in the draft. This is who we're going after. It wouldn't be my suggested choice, but I do think it's a possibility. And that is how they'd get him. Yes, is in the first round.
Let's go to Almost All-Star, who says, should heads roll if, when the music stops, Pittsburgh has to wildly overpay or give too much in a trade to obtain a quarterback?
I don't think heads should roll if that's the case. But I don't think they're going to trade for a quarterback. I do think they're going to pay Rodgers a decent bit of money. I do think Aaron Rodgers is coming to Pittsburgh for more than what Justin Fields went to New York for. And it's probably pretty significantly more than what Justin Fields went to New York for. But it'd come down to guaranteed money and years guaranteed in the whole nine. Like, the Steelers are not going to hurt themselves a year from now for a guy this season. They could take that on this season. They can't. If Aaron Rodgers retires next year, you still get guaranteed money. Like, the Steelers are going to take that risk. So heads should roll. I do expect them to overpay a little bit. I think it's going to be in a way that protects themselves a year from now, where their cap number this year is kind of like, okay, they could still figure everything else out.
Let's jump down to Real-ish again, who says, I say you trade down and grab a cornerback, whether that be Hairston or Siobhan Revel in the first. Then you have Neal, Martinez, etc., Farmer, and Alfred Collins at D tackle, swing tackle late, and a wide receiver. That is an A+ draft.
I love Maxwell Hairston. Siobhan Revel makes me nervous because the ACL thing, obviously. But Maxwell Hairston, is a sleeper in this draft. A sleeper. I think that dude's a stud. I am shocked that he's not getting more recognition as a first-round corner. It actually kind of bothers me that he's being so overlooked because I think he's so fast and lengthy and has the IQ and the football range to just go out there and make plays. Like, I'm a massive Maxwell Hairston fan. I also don't mind, Devin Neal or Martinez, or, I mean, you could even go like Dylan Sampson if you want to go much later than that. Ollie Gordon if you want to go in the middle somewhere. I think all of those are answers too. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way that it goes. I think you could get a starting defensive tackle up until about the third round. And then after that, it's more of a backup guy. I would like the Steelers to get somebody like big and splashy. That would be my only pushback here, is somebody big and splashy at defensive tackle. I think would be really big for this defense, bigger than corner. But it depends on the name, because if you can make all this happen and you get a Maxwell Hairston, but you didn't have the options for Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan or whoever at 21, then I think it makes a lot of sense. Definitely.
Let's go back to Chris, who says, are we really all in if we're keeping Pat Meyer?
Look, I'm telling you, I'm going to say this again. Like, I'm not totally sold on Pat Meyer as an issue. Like, I'm just not. I think he's been hit with a lot of bad mistakes, but I think he's also done like really good things. Like, Ryan McCollum started 3 games last season. Nobody remembers that. Why? Because he played pretty well. Just because Broderick stinks doesn't mean that Pat Meyer stinks. There have been, that offensive line looked really good. It looked like it was ready to go, and then they got beat up. Again, I could be wrong. There are definitely better options than Pat Meyer out there, definitely. But I don't think he's the worst option in the world. I really, truly don't.
Let's go to Irresistible Fan, who says, look forward to watching you guys every day, but curious. I have seen reports that Aaron would cost $90 million to sign, yet we wouldn't give $40 million to Justin. Why is that?
Okay, so the reports are, from what I'm guessing, from what I've seen, guesses. But this is what I've been told, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are willing to pay this part was interpreted. It's interpreted to me that the Pittsburgh Steelers are willing to pay more than what they would have paid for Justin Fields. The only caveat here, did I say that word right? Caveat there, is that Justin wanted guaranteed money in the second year. They will not do that for either quarterback, that they will protect themselves after this season. So they're willing to take a blow this year, but they're not willing to take a blow next year. Aaron Rodgers immediately costs more than Justin Fields anyways, because he's Aaron Rodgers. But they won't set it up where there's guaranteed money in the second season, because they're not willing to take the risk that Aaron retires or he stinks and they have to move on and they have to change quarterback and they still owe Aaron Rodgers money. They're going to protect themselves in that way, but they possibly are going to pay like somewhere around $40 million for Aaron Rodgers if a deal gets done this season.
Let's go to Eddie the First, who says, afternoon, fellas. Hey, Nick, what's Skeen's mobility looking like? He's got the arm. Why not at this point?
I'm liking the Paul Skeen situation. I think that would be awesome. I also saw already that the Pirates are like reportedly not interested in signing him, which
is not right.
Yeah, like, what are we doing? How did we get here?
I will say, you can't sign Skeens to play quarterback because he's going to be pitching late into October this year. I'm Bucktober all the way this year.
He'll be ready by football season.
Yeah, that's the one team I allow myself to be unrealistic about in Pittsburgh.
You have a good time. Okay, everybody should dream. Everybody should dream.
Let's go to Territorio Steeler, who says, hey, Nick and Noah, how is it possible that we haven't gotten any defensive linemen yet? What are we doing?
There really just aren't any available, that should have come off the board. Like Javon Hargrave signed with the 49ers. There have been some smaller names that have gone everywhere. And then obviously Milton Williams, who signed for a massive deal in New England. But it wasn't a loaded class with defensive tackles. It really wasn't. It was a small one. And a lot of these guys went back to DJ Jones went back to Denver. BJ Hill went back to Cincinnati. Like these names kind of flew off the board back to their teams. So I think I think they're headed for the NFL draft. I think they understand that they have one position to fill. that they're going to fill it if they don't fill it in free agency. And then they have guys like DeMarvin Leal. They have guys like Dean Lowry who could come out, the Montravius Adams, who could come off the bench and provide depth. And I would not be stunned if that's their approach this offseason. And to be honest, I fully support it.
Let's go back to Unlimited Moonballs, who says, do you trade back and draft a quarterback? Lamar went 32nd overall.
I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I think my answer is like yes and no. I don't know. Depends on who's there. I don't think there's a Lamar Jackson in this draft. I don't. Like, Lamar was the dude that he was at the time of like, Lamar's upside is unreal, but the NFL is still a little bit like cautious about mobile quarterbacks. They don't really know what's going on there, if that's a good investment. Turns out it was the best investment you could have made as a football team that season. And that was really what pulled him back. This year, it's more just like guys are going to go in the first round because quarterbacks get taken. And that's just what happens. I don't know if I'd trade back for a quarterback. I think nobody's there and the options on the table. The Steelers could think about it and would think about it, but I don't think that I personally would trade back for a quarterback. Now, in the second round, if you get to the middle of the second round and guys like Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart or any of those guys are still there, I have that conversation about moving back up. But I don't think at the end of the first round, maybe trading back in at 32. But that's probably as crazy as I get. I still want a first-round draft pick that isn't a quarterback if I'm the Steelers.
That's a wrap for today, then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, Aaron Rodgers watch continues. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be so many updates, or maybe there's none, but there's still plenty to talk about because the Pittsburgh Steelers, until they do, they don't have a quarterback, and we have to track the entire thing. Appreciate you guys for jumping on once again. Appreciate all of our members and our super chatters, and we will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.